an interesting species. We want the mess to go away. You ever notice that? Just want the mess to go away. The mess meaning our humanity. And what's so fascinating about that is that the more time we spend in wishing something would go away, the more that thing that we're wishing for expands. Thus is the undeniable nature of law, that what you resist persists. And when I say wish something to go away, I want you to think about the broad range of that. I wish that I wasn't born in that family. I wish that I had been born in that family. Then my life would be so different. I wish that I didn't have this particular ailment. I wish that I didn't have this body. I wish that I didn't date that person or marry that person or go down that road. I wish that I had not denied that passion that I had when I was very young and listened to other people and repressed my creativity and went down this path instead. I wish that I had done all of these things differently. And when we spend time in wanting something different than that and regretting and living in the energy of that remorse, then what we actually do is we deny the very instrument that we've been given, the personality, the eccentricities, all of the unique and wonderful and variable and messy gifts that are us. We deny then the ability for that which is the divine, our divinity, to come in and use our humanity in order to birth something new. So hear me when I say your divinity needs your humanity. In fact, divinity is found within our humanity. And without one or the other, then what we're thinking about and what we're aspiring to is something that is beyond comprehension, and it's not a part of the growth and the evolution of the soul. But that both components, both the human and both the divine, are equal and beautiful and necessary in order for you and I to begin to experience and to grow. And so what we do with that then is when we're displeased with our humanity, we start to look at life as an either or, a this or that, a good or a bad. We fall prey to labels. And when something is black or white or either or, there's no integration, there's no richness within the communal things of coming together and having a conversation with something bigger than that, because we have created our stance and we are unmovable in our stance, the either or stance. You ever done that before? It's this or nothing. And so when we do that, we become immobile to the beautiful ways in which life wants to have a conversation with us. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, said that you and I must be in kinship with all of life. Kinship, meaning we must be in a relationship with all of life. Not just the part that's pristine, not just the part that is spiritual or divine, but to be in kinship with our humanity. What would it be like for me to love the mess? What would it be like for me to love every single facet of this instrument, realizing that to the degree that I love it is the degree in which the divinity can then come and through my persona, my personality, my uniqueness, begin to contribute to the world. And so I don't want to deny that, but I want to begin to work at congruency. Ernest Holmes wrote in the bigger declaration of principle that we believe in healing. We believe in healing through the restoration of kinship with all life through the power of this thing called mind. We believe in healing through the power of this thing called mind. We believe absolutely in the power of mind and our ability to use it to evolve our experiences of life. And we call this principle, or we call the act of this, healing. And what does using mind mean? Within us is this vast, limitless, immeasurable We will never be able to measure it. We will never be able to find a boundary to it, is this immeasurable subconscious. You know what I mean by the subconscious? The things within us that is the warehouse, the repository of all human thought, be it elevated thought, be it diminished thought. And when we call it the unconscious, it means that there is within you and I things within there that haven't been untapped yet, that haven't been revealed. Domestication and things, a part of our limited upbringing, that are wanting to rise up in our humanity in order for our divinity to go, what do you want to do about that? But if we keep denying our humanity, then the things that are within us unconsciously, the repository of all of that thought, never gets addressed. We miss out on the opportunity for that expansion. We miss out on the revelation of the divine to come and see, you're far more capable than you thought you were. But I won't have that experience. You won't have that experience if we don't begin to love the vessel, the instrument, the mind, the messiness, the humanness of who and what we are. And so as we begin to get into kinship with all of life, we think about what Ralph Waldo Emerson says, and that is that the universe conspires. I love that word, conspires. The universe conspires what? It's conspiring for our good. You might not think it's good, but when it's conspiring for our good, what is it trying to conspire? It's trying to conspire to bring up all of the unconsciousness that is housed within this subjective state, this subconscious inside of us, in order to look at that and say, is this what you want to continue to do? That's growth. If I'm not in conversation, and I love that word. See, I want to be in conversation with my humanness. I want to be in conversation with why I'm trying to run away from this particular situation. I want to be in conversation with the illness that's in my body. I want to listen to it. Rather than trying to make it go away, I want to be in conversation with it because there's information there. I want to be in conversation with why I am so fearful about stepping into the unknown. And the fact that I keep running and playing small and going back to what's familiar, even when I know that that's not the best decision for myself. So I want to begin to have a conversation with that level of fear that keeps me stagnant. I want to begin to have a conversation with why I hate so vehemently about certain characteristics and certain people and certain aspects in certain ways. I want to have a conversation with why that injustice button lives inside of me and what that's about. I can't have those conversations if I'm not being willing to honor my humanity. So instead of wanting it to go away, I want you to think about saying, come here, sit down, and let's talk. That's the first step, you see. If you're willing to stop avoiding what is uncomfortable, then you can begin to have that divine dialogue. And in that divine dialogue, the divinity of you and the essence of you can begin to come and interweave itself in bringing you solutions and experiences that you've never dreamed of before. But it takes consciousness. It takes an understanding that the power and the permission of that rest within you and your decision. The science of mind teaches that all things in our world are actually caused by the beliefs that are held in our unconscious minds. By changing what we believe, and there are varying modalities of this, whether that's hypnosis, whether that's chanting, whether that's affirmation, whether that's the modality that we use so often, spiritual mind treatment, which is affirmative prayer, which is treating the mind spiritually. In other words, this thing called mind that I have, which is my vehicle to choose and to think. If I practice mindfulness with that tool, then I'm treating my mind from a spiritual perspective, from the spiritual lens. I'm looking at the world of effect, and I'm willing to see beyond what it is that I see on the surface. I'm willing to know, I'm willing to understand that even in the apparent absence of love, there is love. Even in the apparent absence of order, there is always divine order. When I have that then as my mainstay, then I'm beginning to be in conversation with mind. And I'm not avoiding things, and I'm not going unconscious. I'm very much present, and I'm very mindful. So I listen. I listen to my lungs. I listen to my joints. I listen to my eyesight. I listen to the things cellularly within me that might be labeled as diseased. And I have a conversation with that. And as I began to do that, then and only then do I have the ability to usher in the divine, which brings me clarity, which teaches me the varying modalities of healing. Because you see, healing isn't always just physical. Sometimes it's healing ourselves emotionally of all of the hatred and all of the resistance that I've had inside of me. Sometimes that healing shows up spiritually, where I've been walking around with this spiritual wounding my whole life and distancing myself from creation or God or whatever you want to call it, simply because of the way in which I've been raised. And if I'm willing to have a conversation with that, then I can begin to fall in love with the infinite creative source and power and have a real relationship with that. So in having these conversations then, I begin to realize that there is no limitation on this principle. No limitation on this principle which tells me that whatever then that I habitually and chronically have conversation with in this creative capacity called mind becomes my reality, becomes my healing, becomes my kinship then with all of life. And so I remember often in my own path and in my own struggles of how that whole thing about wanting something to go away really robs us of the juiciness of transformation. You've heard me talk before, but about 17 years ago, just the physical challenge that I had with this persistent cough that wouldn't go away. And the fact that I spent everything that I had trying to uncover what this cough was. And I remember how much I hated that cough. I hated it. I hated the fact that it was debilitating. I hated the fact that it was interrupting and getting in the way of me doing my work. I traveled on the road probably some 37 weeks out of the year, where I would be speaking or singing, teaching, keynoting, all those kinds of things which are a part of my world, which is what I thought I was put on the planet to do. And then all of a sudden, when the instrument by which I'm doing that is flawed and prohibiting me from doing it productively or pristinely or perfectly, then I'm angry. And I'll even say, with all of my knowledge, I'm angry at God. Like, what does that mean? I'm angry at something that I don't believe is outside of me. So what am I really angry with? I'm angry with that I'm not getting my way. I want this to go away. You see, I want it to go away, but I'm not willing to have a conversation with it. And so finally, after I left my last gig in my calendar before I canceled everything else, I was walking in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, and it was dead man walking. I mean, I was just like, wow. I was humiliated by what had transpired at my event because I couldn't do my job. And I remember walking with my head hanging low in that airport, and I looked up at one of those big advertisements that is posted there that's all brightly lit in the airport, and it said, "Embrace change." Oh, you would think I was so spiritual that the Hallelujah chorus would just, And I looked at that and I was so pissed. I wanted to take my shoe off and just throw it at the sign. It's like, really? And I remember getting home, and I had this really great dining room table that I had spent a lot of money on because I loved it. It was this big, thick combination pine oak table, and it was big and massive. And I had this wonderful spot in my house where it sat. And I remember sitting at that dining room table, and I took all of my bills, and I just fanned them out all across that table. And I thought, now what? And the despair and the anxiety and all of that just started to churn. And I kid you not, as I sat there just staring at it, this voice, this audible voice just came over me, and it said, "Where did your mother pay her bills?" And I was like, what kind of question is that? Where did your mother pay her bills? And I thought about it, and I thought, oh my God, she paid them at a dining room table, fanned out just exactly the way that I had done it. And the energy by which she would do that was distraught and anxious and fearful and loud and messy and exasperated. And it was awful. And I was overcome by the fact that in that realm of the subconscious, the unconscious repository of all thought, of all chosen belief, rested within me the identical form by which my mother treated and thought of money and resource. I was supposed to be spiritual. I was supposed to be above all of that. I was supposed to have it together. I traveled 30-something weeks out of the year teaching this stuff. And what am I doing? I am uncovering something that has not been conversed with. And I am simply repeating the form and the pattern of what I learned and what I observed as a child. Here's your turn, David. What are you going to do with it? And I was doing exactly what I had saw. So every book knowledge and all the intellect that I had gleaned from that was for naught, because now I was being given the opportunity to put this to practice. And I was failing miserably. Ralph Waldo Emerson said the universe what? Conspires. Conspires. I think it conspires to have the conversation. I think it conspires to get your and my attention in order for us to look at how I'm treating this humanity so that the divinity can come in. The universe is conspiring and saying, wait a minute, if you're not willing to have this conversation, at some point, we're going to have to get your attention in whatever way we can. Let's give them a cough. Let's just take it all away. And so I put all of those bills in an envelope, and I drove to another table. I drove to one of those big concrete picnic tables that are in the park. I was in Los Angeles, and this was in Griffith Park. And so I found one of those big concrete outdoor picnic tables. Because if you put me in nature, I can remember better. So I'm in nature. It's a gorgeous day. It's a gorgeous day, and I took and I fanned all the bills out on the concrete table. And then I just sat there, and I looked at the trees, and I looked at the abundance of leaves that were on the tree. I looked at the blades of grass and the abundance of all of the grass that was extended before me, and the dirt and the rock and all of the elements. And not one of those things, not one blade of grass said, I know you think I'm green, but oh my God, you should have seen me in the spring of '99. Now that was some green, baby. It wasn't qualifying itself, and I was qualifying. He's like, I don't have this anymore, so I'm no good. Who am I if I don't have this? But the grass wasn't doing that. The trees weren't doing that. The dirt wasn't doing that. It was all just being. And so in my beingness, it was like what Al was talking about in the opening treatment. I allowed that which was gratitude to just pour forth through me. And I just kept saying thank you. And I began to have a conversation. I began to have a conversation with my physicality, with my humanity. I began to cry. I began to think about all the things that weren't going the way in which I wanted them to go. And I began to surrender. And in the surrendering and in that place of gratitude, I started to write the checks for the bills. I didn't have the money in the account, but I wrote the checks. And I put them in the envelope and sealed the envelope, put the stamp on it, put it aside, wrote the next check. This process went on for a long time because there would be some bills that would come across and I'd go, ooh. And then I would go back into that fear and I would put the pen down and I would go and I'd stare again at all of my surroundings until finally I was ready and I would pick the pen back up and I would proceed. And when I was done, I put everything back into the bigger envelope and I got in my car and I drove home. And this was in the day when everybody had a landline. Remember a landline? It's called a phone. And we had phones in homes. Do you remember the time when we had phones in homes? And the phone in the home was ringing. It was ringing. What a concept. It was ringing. I mean, simultaneously, I'm kidding, I swear to God, as I'm unlocking the door, it's ringing. And so I'd go and I pick it up. And there's a woman on the other end. And she said, "Hi, is this David Ault?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I need to verify all of your information." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "My name is so-and-so. I'm from Screen Actors Guild. And you made such and such movie a couple of years ago." And I was like, okay. Now, a long time ago, you could get cast in movies and you could sign a waiver because if it was an independent movie and it did not have distribution, you could sign a waiver that said, if you don't have to pay me anything, I don't even have to abide by union rules. I'll show up for as long as the film takes place. But if this thing ever gets picked up by distribution, then you will be paid. And she said, "So this film that you made, somebody bought the video rights for distribution. So I'm having to go through and I'm having to pay all of the actors." How much? It was within $20 of the cumulative amount of checks that I wrote in the part. But the thing to understand about that is that if I had stayed in the energy of what took place at the dining room table, then the divinity which tells you that there are solutions that you and I haven't even thought of, can't come. Because our resistance continues to push those things away. I'm convinced that had I not gone and changed my energy and had that conversation, that breakthrough would not have come. Now, just to show you the nature of humanity, the moment that I did my happy dance in my kitchen for about 5 minutes, then I was like, well, then what? Because I was still coughing. Just to show you that this is an ongoing process. And there was so much more that came out of that. But when we begin to look at the nature of healing, so that one to me was both emotional and spiritual. And in my research for the topic of kinship of all of life, when you look at the nature of healing physically, you have to remember too that the same principles apply. So there's this classic story, and I want you to Google this when you get home today because it's phenomenal. Google the hypnotist and the warts. Just remember that. In 1952, there was a hypnotherapist by the name of Dr. Albert Mason, who was having relative success with people who had skin issues. And so people were getting great results with their skin and with lesions and warts and things that were bothering them. And so he would hypnotize them. And what a hypnotist does is the same thing that a practitioner does. Because what the practitioner is doing as they're praying is they're pouring what? They're pouring information into the subconscious. And if you cooperate and you pour that same information into the subconscious, then a different result comes forth. It's the same principle. All of this is stemmed from Anton Mesmer back in the 1770s and understanding the power and the discovery of the subconscious mind. So a hypnotherapist does the same thing. It's more clinical than spiritual, but it's the same thing. And so the patient comes in and they pour information into the subconscious mind. And if the resistance is not there, then benefit occurs. So this boy walks in to this doctor's office, and his skin is hardened and blackened so much. The surface is like the surface of your nail. It's unbendable. And he's thinking that it's just this real advanced case of all the other things that he's been treating. But this boy is covered, except for his face, except for his neck, and except for his chest. But all of his limbs, to the point when he would bend it, the skin would crack. And the boy was in perpetual pain. And so Dr. Mason hypnotized him. And he started with the one arm. And he began to pour into the subconscious mind of himself and of this boy the fact that there was wholeness there, that the skin was supple, and that everything was returning to mobility and fluidity, and that there was perfection and wholeness there. There are pictures, that's why I want you to Google it. There are pictures of how that diseased arm was restored within a matter of 2 weeks. And then he went to the other arm, and then he went to the legs, and he did this whole process. But guess what happened towards the end of Dr. Mason treating this boy? He looked at a file that someone gave him, and he saw the word incurable disease. That what this boy had wasn't your typical just really bad lesion, wart, kind of viral thing, but that it was an incurable, vicious, epidermal disease that was rare. And the moment that he saw that, his confidence changed. And all of a sudden, he entertained the idea that he couldn't do this anymore, that his methodology wasn't effective. And the story goes that it affected him so profoundly that he stopped practicing, and then he dismissed the power of hypnotherapy after that. So I want you to think about that, because we are like that. A label will come along the atmosphere in our humanity that will say impossible, incurable, no remedy, no solution, whatever, finality. And you and I will then accept that. And in our kinship with life, we will cut the relationship of that possibility to be able to come through the modality of healing. So the message is, how far and how deep and how rich are you willing to have conversation with all of the unresolved, unconscious things that want to be brought up when the universe conspires? It's conspiring for you and I to become great communicators. Where is it that you think that something is unhealable? Where is it that you think that something is unsolvable? Where is it that you have defined yourself in such a rigid way that you completely shut out any other solution that wants to come? What's so fascinating about that is there are those of us in this room who do that even intellectually when we know better. And so as we stand in the energy and the possibility of kinship with all life, it becomes our opportunity to say yes. Yes, I'm willing to sit down. I'm willing to have this conversation with my lungs, with my limbs, with my heart, with my eyesight. I'm willing to have a conversation with my sense of abandonment. I'm willing to have a conversation with my poverty consciousness. I'm willing to have a conversation with my self-loathing, who continues time and time again to put my power into the hands of somebody else. I'm willing to have a conversation with all the times that I have dismissed myself and my passion and my creativity because I couldn't afford it, because it wouldn't make money, because I felt stupid. I'm willing to have a conversation. And in my willingness, my kinship with life returns to me. And I get to embrace my messiness. And I get to understand exactly and profoundly the intermingling of the divine by means of me. And I get to accept and surrender and go, yes, even this has the same potency as any other person that we have deified, because we are all part of the one creative mind. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.